Washington.
All right.
Not their armpit.
Yeah, look at that.
Well, I'm sorry that the timing worked out, folks. I'll try to do the best I can. As I said, most of my speech is a historical presentation. I got my chamber flag too. Loaded? Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, as most of you know, my name is Mike Vanderboe, and I'm from Alabama, and I'm a 3%er. Some of you may remember that Bill Clinton denounced us back on the 19th of April and said we were a clear and present danger to liberty. Somebody, probably him. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, we take our name proudly from the 3% of the American colonists who took the field against the forces of the king during our revolution. Now, this 3% was actively supported by perhaps another 10% of the population, with another 20% sort of rah-rah and didn't really do much, but they were for us. You may be familiar with that, folks like that today. Now, there was another third that sided with the king, and a third in the middle that blew at the wind and took what came. They didn't care who ruled them, or even if they were ruled. They just didn't want to take the time to worry about it.
Right.
Kind of like today.
Yeah.
But the 3% of the revolution were fighters. It is appropriate that we are met here today on one of the most important battlefields of that war. A battlefield where 2 of North Carolina's signers of the Declaration of Independence are buried. And a battlefield where the 3% fought and died and ultimately lost the battle, but won the war. The battle at Guilford Courthouse would not have been possible without 4 men. 2 Americans and 2 British, 2 of whom weren't even here. And forgive me if I take a little detour into history here, but if history hardly ever exactly repeats itself, it often stutters in the same pattern. And there are lessons in this story that are relevant today, and perhaps in the near future.
Sorry.
First, let me set the stage. Long frustrated by Washington's refusal to be destroyed in the decisive battle in the North, Sir Henry Clinton, who commanded the Crown forces on this continent, sailed south and after a brief siege captured Charleston on May the 12th, 1780. Now, more than 5,000 3%ers were captured at Charleston, and we lost tons of precious supplies. It was a disaster. Clinton then sailed back north to his mistress, and he left Lord Cornwallis to complete the conquest of the Carolinas. With him were 2 men whose actions would decisively shape the battle here at Guilford Courthouse: Patrick Ferguson and Banastre Tarleton. On August 15th, Cornwallis met the revolutionary forces under the vain and thoroughly incompetent General Horatio Gates at a place called Camden, South Carolina, and he whipped him with the help of a cavalry charge by Banastre Tarleton. Now, Tarleton was the son of a Liverpool ship owner, a merchant, and a slave trader. And he had squandered his inheritance and fled England in 1775 for America, seeking to make a name for himself and restore his fortunes at our expense. Tarleton's nicknames among the 3% at the time were the Butcher and Bloody Bane. He had earned that reputation after his Green Dragoons had slaughtered hundreds of surrendering Virginia Continentals at the Battle of Waxhaw. In his attempts to suppress the guerrilla bands in South Carolina, such as Francis Marion's, Tarleton alienated the citizenry and made the guerrillas work easier by numerous acts of cruelty to the civilian population. And by his many cruelties and massacres, Tarleton set the stage for the campaign. He even alienated loyalists and angered the 3%ers and gave them a thirst for justifiable vengeance. The second of Cornwallis's officers to shape this battle here was Major Patrick Ferguson. As brilliant as Tarleton was cruel, the Scottish officer was an early advocate of light infantry tactics, and he was the designer of the Ferguson rifle, a remarkable breech-loading flintlock. Ferguson was chosen by Cornwallis to recruit Loyalist militia in the Carolinas and Georgia, and to intimidate any colonists who favored American independence. Now, initially, Ferguson had great success, but if he was brilliant, even though he'd been in the colonies for more than 3 years, he still did not understand the American character. On September 10, 1780, Ferguson issued a challenge to Patriot leaders to lay down their arms, or he would, quote, lay waste to their country with fire and sword, close quote. He later issued a second call for Loyalists to join him, lest they be, quote, and you might want to cover your children's ears here, lest they be pissed upon by a set of mongrels. Needless to say, this didn't go over very well with the Patriots. Even for the over-the-mountain men who lived in what would later be East Tennessee, and who had been reluctant to get involved in previous battles to the east, such an insulting threat could not be ignored. Tarleton had proven to them what the British meant when they said laid waste by fire and sword, when he murdered surrendering Continentals. And calling such proud and independent men a pissing set of mongrels was an absolute guarantee of a fight. If you don't believe that, go into any country bar in the South today and use similar words and watch what happens. By the afternoon of October 7th, the 3%ers caught Ferguson and his forces at Kings Mountain, surrounded him, destroyed his force, killing him, yelling, "Give them Tarleton's quarter." In other words, no quarter at all. Ferguson and 244 of his loyalists were killed, and the rest, more than 800 men, were all wounded or captured. Some of the more notorious ones, the ones who had committed murders on their own, were taken out and unceremoniously hung by men who were getting back at what had happened to them. The Patriots lost a mere 29 killed and 58 wounded at Kings Mountain. The destruction of Ferguson's command and the looming threat of the 3%er militia in the mountains of the Carolinas caused Cornwallis to fall back temporarily to South Carolina. Many loyalists who had been thinking about joining the previously victorious British promptly changed their minds. Kings Mountain, by the numbers an insignificant battle in the larger war, was a pivotal moment thanks to the brutal, ill-considered, and arrogant actions of Tarleton and Ferguson. Ferguson never left Kings Mountain, but Tarleton had yet to be taught his lesson. That would come at the Battle of Cowpens. It would be driven home by the third of our 4 key players who shaped the battle here, Daniel Morgan. Now, Dan Morgan was one of the most gifted tacticians and combat field commanders of the American Revolution. Born in New Jersey, he left home at the age of 16 after a fist fight with his daddy, eventually settling in Virginia. A big man, poorly educated, but practical and charismatic, he was a natural leader. Early in his life, he had worked clearing land in a sawmill and as a teamster. And during the French and Indian Wars, as a teamster, he was given 499 lashes for punching an arrogant British officer square in the nose. Now that punishment, 499 lashes, would have killed the Leshers.